Hi, guys. Um, Welcome to Embracing Your Creative Process, um, an intuitive approach by me. I'm Marilyn Svetanek, and today we're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation with, of course, my discussion of every point. But the idea being, we'll go through it, and then later on, you'll have access to this presentation and this video, and you can go through the exercises at your leisure because there's too much here to just do it as I talk. And you should never rush when you're drawing or painting. So, um, a little bit about me. The most important thing with respect to this presentation is that I've been painting since I was about 30, which is a while ago. And I got a PhD that was very analytical. I was very frustrated, never once considered going to art school, but I just realized I had to paint. And I thought, oh, I'm going to wait till I'm retired. And then I was like, why? Um, I'm going to start painting now. And I'm going to just do what I feel like doing. And that's how this all evolved. Now, it didn't evolve without my reading what other people do or talking to other artists or participating in workshops. It's not like this is invented out of whole cloth, but my focus has been not letting instruction or rules interfere with the creative. So why make art? You got to ask yourself, why are we bothering? Um, and the reason is that releasing your creative potential is empowering. The more creative you can be, the more you can reach into yourself and find out who and what you have to say, the more powerful you are. So the exercises we're going to go through are designed to paint and draw. But there's not this compartmentalization in our minds and in our hearts. When we're free in that respect, in that visual respect, we are also freer verbally. We feel more comfortable, for example, singing. I don't have a great voice. I don't sing in front of people, but I sing all the time. It feels good. Um, so I love this quote by Georgia O'Keeffe. She says, I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way, things I had no words for. We all have that within ourselves. We have these ideas that, not everything is verbal. But to take that creative plunge, to really allow ourselves to be free takes courage because there's nothing in most of our lives that says be yourself for real. Go and tell me what's really going on in your heart. And after a while, after we get a little older, kids are free, born free. But after we get a little older, we have a lot of blockages. So in this workshop, we will focus on process. Do not worry about what your end product looks like. What we're trying to generate here is a free flow between what we see with our eyes, that translates into our brain. Very importantly, it goes to our hearts, and then it goes to our hands. And that's where our relationship with our materials comes into play. But you can't get to that point. You can't open up that pathway if you're judging yourself. If you're telling yourself, I can't draw, I can't paint, I'm not creative. That's just not true. Everyone has a creative self. We just keep that part of ourselves repressed a lot of the time. So judgment is one way of repressing that. So if you took an art class in college or whatever, and you got a C, and the professor was saying, this person doesn't know how to draw. You just don't get it. No, that is judgment, and that gets in your way. So don't get confused and derailed by judgment. And any teacher that says you don't know what you're doing is, I think, not a very good teacher. Let's just leave it at that. So poor Vincent van Gogh heard a lot of those voices early in his drawing years and painting years. And we all know how brilliant he was. But he came to this conclusion, and this is from one of his letters to his brother Theo. He says, if you hear a voice within you say you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. And that's part of what we want to get to today. When you hear those voices saying, you can't do this, or somebody tells you, you can't paint, paint, be creative, and that voice will become irrelevant to you. Um, People ask all the times when they embark on a workshop like this, what kind of materials do you have to have? You don't have to have anything in particular that you don't already have at home. I mean, you can do a lot of these exercises with a box of crayons and some pencils. Now, they might be a lot more fun if you had more materials, but don't let a lack of materials uh, lead to procrastination, because that's what I know. I do that with other things. No, I don't have the right software, so I can't do a certain thing, or I don't have the right shoes, so I can't go on a certain hiking trip or whatever. No, no, no. Just use what you've got. If you want to take a trip to the art supply store, great, but you don't have to. Ultimately, you want to do these exercises with a variety of materials. So, my basics are pencils, felt tip pens, watercolors. My dog just walked in. And I like these Canson sketchbooks. They're big enough so that you have a little bit of room to be fluid, 7 by 10 inches, and they're mixed media. So you can use water-based watercolors, acrylic paint on them, or you could just draw with a pencil. They'll take anything, and I get this from Blick, they're very inexpensive. So if you need a recommendation, there you have it. Okay, so where are we going in this presentation? Um, we are going to begin with an intuitive approach to line. And I've got illustrations. Then we're going to move to shape and form. And then we're going to move into color and composition. And those are a little different in that that's truly intuitive stuff. And I'll explain that. The shape and form is a little more analytical, but finally, all of these topics involve observation. So the more you observe, it's just the more you understand, the more that pathway between your eyes, your brain, your heart, and your hand gets opened and exercised. So let's begin with the power of line. This is a line drawing by Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso was a master of line. And you can see how just a few lines create this image that has just so much feel to it. I think it's beautiful, but it's also kind of ethereal. This figure this face kind of flows. It has a very kind of direct, but also mysterious feel to it. And this is all with line. So line is your most powerful tool. And it's where we begin. So a little bit of background information. A line can say something all by itself. So here we've got 3 lines, and the first one is a horizontal. How do our brains interpret a horizontal line? We interpret it as stability. So sometimes when you see a drawing with a lot of horizontals, you may kind of feel like if they're straight across lines, it's kind of set. It's very stable, which can be a good thing, or not, depending on what you want to convey. But the second line here is a vertical, and that's sometimes can evoke a sense of movement upwards, downwards, baby, dog. And it can also feel a little less stable than that horizontal. So it feels like it may have a bit more of a flow, a little more movement. And finally, the diagonal. And the diagonal is an unstable line. It implies movement, motion, something that maybe is coming down, maybe it's coming up, but it implies movement. So this is background information. This is not something you want to necessarily have at the forefront of your mind when you do these exercises. It's just a little something in the background. So when you look at your exercises and kind of understand what's happening, you've got this little bit of information. Lines can express almost anything. And as we saw in that Picasso, very simple line drawing, but it's a masterpiece. Here you've got, see some lines on this page on the left and then on the right. The ones on the left were created with a pen, one of those pens with a brush on the end of it. And I like those because you can apply pressure to make the line thicker, or you can release the pressure and it can be thinner. But you can see this line at the bottom, this curly line, has a very different feel than the top line, which is just almost like a flowing water flow. And that horizontal is just a straight up stable line. The dotted line means it may or may not be there. The thicker line has a more gravitas, if you will, than a thinner line. And the line with a lot of up and downs can feel very chaotic. Mine is pretty equal. I was in a good mood when I did this, but it can feel chaotic if the line is less uniform. The lines on the right are somewhat similar, but they're digitally created. Some of you may want to work digitally. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're not as connected physically to your materials. So while you can create an infinite number of lines drawing digitally, and if that's really your medium, go for it. But I'm assuming that most of you will be working with paper and ink or pencil or what have you. But I kind of like my digital lines here. I especially like the one that's really thick and very distressed looking. Okay, here's the first exercise. So you want to get familiar with your materials, including your paper. What does it feel like to draw on this paper? Is it smooth? Does the paper have ridges? Is the paper thick? And what's your pencil or your pen or whatever it is you're using? What is that like on the paper? What is it? What does your hand feel like? If you're intimidated by a blank sheet of paper, and many of us are, the easiest way to get over that is just start drawing along the edges of the paper. And that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side. Just I went around the edges and then I went right through the middle, made a big X, and then I own this paper. I own this space. And then I just made some freer lines there. And if I were doing this exercise maybe the first time, I would probably have continued doing this, using these lines. And how long should you make these free form lines? As long as you feel like it. I know when I first did these exercises, I would take a piece of paper and spend maybe 15 minutes just going through and making lines. It really loosens you up, and it's an exercise that's worth doing down the line. If you keep drawing and painting, it's something you want to come back to. If you feel stiff, if you feel like, oh, I'm kind of in a rut, just make lines. And keep your pencil or pen moving, at least at first. And finally, do this exercise 10 times with different types of materials. So the image on the right, I used a pen and I also used a pencil. So the thickness and movement of the lines feels different. There's lines, the thick lines that come to the foreground. There's little pencil lines that almost feel like background. Do this and experiment with it. And don't worry whether it looks good or not. Probably won't, but that's not the point. The point is process, that you're doing this, that you're loosening up, and that you're getting a sense of your materials. Okay, now lines ultimately define shapes. So here I did two little line drawings, and again, I kept them very simple in my sketchbook. The one on the left clearly has shapes. I went ahead and actually created shapes with my lines, which you can do. Your exercise does not have to look like mine, where it's just a bunch of random lines. You can make shapes. There's nothing wrong with that. The one on the right has more free form lines and lines that end, lines that begin. They're not just shapes. But that's why I chose that one to take to the next step. We look at these exercises with these lines and we say, are there some shapes here? And there are. So the drawing to the left, shapes are obvious. Drawing to the right, they're not as obvious. So that's the one I chose to work with. And after this, we decide which one we want to work with, and we pick out the lines that make the shapes that we're interested in. So you can see how I just went over those lines. And I created I emphasized them, and I created what could be the beginning of a more elaborate project if I wanted to do that or not. Again, it's entirely up to you. You can do this and stop here. That's what I did. Or you can do this and continue to the next point, which with this case would be color. But before we talk about color, I want to talk a little bit more about shape. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of exercises that are more analytical. And these are exercises that you might have done in a drawing class before. They might appear in a drawing book, like I think some of them are in Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain, which is a great book. So they help us as confidence builders, and they help us with our skills of observations. Because remember that pathway, eye, brain, heart, hand. It begins with the eye. That's observation. So what you do here is, first of all, take your time. You do not want to rush through this. Hold out your hand like you can see I'm doing in this picture. And in my case, I held out my left hand, and then I drew with my right hand, but I didn't look at my paper. And I looked at every little detail in my left hand, and I did a contour drawing. For the most part, with the exception of the place where the thumb and the rest of the hand intersect, I've got these big heavy lines there, so I drew them in. But this was done without looking at the paper. I looked only at my hand. And you can spend 5 minutes doing this. You can spend 10, you can spend 15 minutes doing this. It's all about observing every little curve in the contour of your 5 fingers in your palm. And you'll end up with the drawing that looks weird. It's not necessarily a drawing you're going to want to show anybody, but again, we're not concerned with the end product. We're concerned with the process, that process of closely observing the contours of your fingers and drawing them on a piece of paper. So this is a really good exercise to do. This is another exercise, face vase drawing. And this is one that, my apologies, first of all, when I put together this image of the face vase, it's not perfectly symmetrical on both sides. I did it in Photoshop and I don't know, I just couldn't get it even, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. You can look at this image and you see a blue vase or you see two faces. And the faces, the outline of the faces make the vase. The exercise is to duplicate this as a drawing. So what you do is if you're right-handed, you draw a profile. Doesn't have to be perfect, however you want to draw a profile on the left-hand side of the paper. Then you want to draw the inverse on the right-hand side of the paper to finish the vase. So you're going to have to do kind of the opposite of what you just did. And it forces our eyes to look at every curve in the original profile, every straight line, every angle in order to to replicate it in the inverse on the opposite side. This exercise is in Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And the author, I'm blanking on her name, she does a great job of talking about what happens in your brain when you do this. And it's worth reading if you have the book at home. But you also don't need to read it if you don't feel like it, you just do it. And you're working towards symmetry. You want to make the vase, complete it. You draw the horizontal across the top, the horizontal across the bottom, and then you've got your vase. Let's say you've been doing this exercise a few times and it's gotten to be easy, which is a good sign. Then instead of drawing a profile on the left-hand side, you can draw any kind of zigzaggedy shape you want and try to do the inverse of it on the right-hand side. And that's going to be pretty challenging and probably kind of fun. Be aware of what it feels like to draw the first profile and then what it feels like to draw the second one. The second one should hurt your brain a little bit, but that's good. So getting back to what I was saying before, the face vase for right-handers, you want to start with the profile on the left-hand side of your paper. If you're left-handed, you want to draw it on your right-hand side, and that just makes it easier to carry out the exercise. And I pulled these right off of the internet, and I think they are from Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain workbook or something like that. Got to give credit where credit is due. Okay, this is another wonderful, sometimes frustrating exercise. And again, this is about observation. So the more you do these, the better you just get at observation, seeing what's around you. And there's a payoff to this, believe me. This is an upside down drawing. I chose to do a face. You want to pick something simple. You set up your drawing area so that you have room for your initial thing that you're going to draw and your drawing paper. I liked picking out this image from, I think it was from Vanity Fair magazine. So it's kind of the same, close to the same size as my drawing paper, which made it easy. What made it hard is I realized the soft focus that the photographer used, because when I started really looking for lines when it was upside down, I was like, wait, there's no line, it's just a blur. So you may have to deal with that. But what you do is you take your picture, put it upside down. In my case, I did it on my left-hand side because I'm right-handed. my piece of blank paper on my right-hand side, and I just started trying to copy the picture that I selected. So I'm drawing this woman's face. She's famous, but of course, because I'm know nothing about popular culture, I'm not quite sure who she is. But any case, I picked something I like drawing. You don't need to work with a face. You can work with anything you want. I just suggest that you not try to copy an abstract form. And the reason for that is that in doing a face or flowers or a dog or cat or what have you, you're breaking the mold that's in your head about what a face is supposed to look like. What is an eye supposed to look like? What is a nose supposed to look like? What's a flower supposed to look like? So by having to do it upside down, it's like doing the blind drawing of your hand. You're looking at every curve like for the first time. So again, your drawing may not be something that you want to share with people, but that's okay because this is all about process. I don't know if I have. Okay. And now we're getting to the more intuitive part of the presentation, color. And I pulled a couple of quotes from my files of quotes. So the first one is Gauguin. What deep and mysterious language, the color of dreams. That's the language of dreams. That's what he says about color. Matisse, with color, one obtains an energy that seems to stem from witchcraft. Color is magic. However, if you buy books on drawing and painting, you'll find a lot of color theory. Instructions on how do you make a certain green, how do you make a certain blue, and what are tonalities, what are values, what's this, what's that. It's really confusing for me. And at some point, early on, I just said, forget it, I'm just going to paint. As Van Gogh said, just paint. So I decided not to worry about color theory. And I suggest you do the same. Maybe if you're been painting for a long time or been doing this for a while and you're curious about color theory, read up on it. Go through some exercises. But we're talking about working intuitively, and we all have our own color sense. Some people may gravitate towards black and turquoise. I love those two. Someone was in my studio the other day and he just said, I love the purple and the green. Well, purple and green. Yeah, they're great together, but no book will ever tell you that. It's just something that you have to feel, something you have to observe. And some of you might be saying purple and green. I don't know about that. It doesn't matter. We all have our own kind of internal sensibility for color. And it goes along with our internal sensibility for line and form. If you ever looked at people's signatures, everyone's signature is different. Because that's how we're different, the way we hold our pencils, hold our pens, hold our paintbrushes. And it's the same thing about color. So that's why these two quotes are so great. Because Gauguin, who's one of the great colorists in Western art, he's a post-impressionist, and he had access to really good colors in terms of being able to buy tubes of paint in all different colors. He didn't have to mix each color, grind up all the pigment, and do all that stuff that his predecessors had to do. So he had that advantage, but he's still a great colorist. And he talks about it as a deep and mysterious language. And he never went to art school, by the way. And I love this painting that I'm showing you, the vision after the sermon. The reason I love it as an example of color is that it's simple, but really packs a punch. Here we have these women, I think they're from Brittany. I'm not exactly sure. They're all wearing the traditional caps of that part of France. This is the 19th century. It's a rural area in the countryside. They're not from Paris for sure. And you can even see they come out of church. They've just heard a sermon from, I guess it's Genesis. Um, Jacob wrestling with the angel or wrestling with God. And he wants God's blessing really badly. And it's a metaphor for confronting our own flaws. So here, Gauguin gives us this painting of Jacob wrestling with an angel. And it's happening after these women have just heard a sermon on this topic. And they're walking outside and they see a cow. There's a tree branch, but the action is happening on this orange-red field, which has nothing to do with reality. There's no field this color, but he's giving us that to add some emotional punch to the painting, to this wrestle between the spiritual and the physical. So if he just gave it to us on a green field, it would have been good. It's Gauguin, but it wouldn't be this. And Matisse is the same. He's a real master of color. And we'll talk more about artists towards the end of the presentation when we talk about composition and so on. But the exercises that I showed you with shape and observation challenge our intellect. We're using our brains there, maybe a bit more than the heart. When we get to color, it's heart. It's really what's in our emotions, what we're about. And that's where that really great intuitive, developing your intuitive self really comes through. So here's an exercise. It's really simple. I did this one. I like doing these exercises. I like color. So I did this myself. And again, bear with me. I don't have photos of student projects, so I'm having to show you my own work. Hopefully I'll get to do this workshop in person again and I'll remember to take pictures. So exercise 5, begin with colors and materials that you like. What speaks to you? I happen to use felt tip pens. You can use any medium you want. I started with the line exercise, and unlike the other line exercise that I showed you, in this case, I'm using some real jagged edges. It's reflective of my mood. I had a long day and I was just feeling a little rougher around the edges. I wasn't flowing. So I created these shapes that connected one into the next. And then, pretty spontaneously, I switched to a different color. I went from, I think I started with the bright green that's kind of faded back, and I went to red. And then I went to blue, and then I went to turquoise. It's just what I felt like doing. And then I realized, ooh, if I surround that green with the red and the blue and the other colors, it kind of gives the whole thing some dimension. But again, this is not a thought through process. It's just a process that I felt comfortable with. And then I started filling in some of the triangular forms. Again, I'm working very intuitively, very spontaneously, not a lot of analysis going on. Very different from looking at my hand and drawing the contour of it, where I'm really looking for it. This is much more spontaneous. You can do this with watercolors. You can do this with acrylic paint. Do not hesitate to blend colors ever. Feel free to mix colors together. You're going to end up with some really beautiful tones that way that no one else has ever seen. But we can also end up with a weird brown or a gray. And I've seen students get stuck in this corner where they're going, well, I mixed the blue and the red and then I put in some orange and I got this weird brown. Okay, there's lots of weird brown in the world. You can work with that. You can use that as the base to spring off of, to add some orange to the outline outside or some green or whatever else you want to do. You can work with that. And I feel like personally, I like working with unexpected things that happen. I'm not going to call them mistakes. They're just things that happened unexpectedly. A drip of paint. Oh no, I ruined something that I worked on for an hour. No, work with the drip. That's just me though. You can work with it. And we have a tendency to limit ourselves to bright colors. You don't need to do that. So if you get a blob of gray, you, you can work with it. But if you really don't feel like it, don't. Just paint over it or draw over it or get rid of it. Start over entirely. The whole key to working intuitively is feeling free to rip out a piece of paper you've been working on or drawing and throwing it away. You don't have to force anything. So, because it's all about process. All of the options I've given you, A, B, and C, they're all good options. Now, again, bear with me. This is a piece I did in my sketchbook. It's not very big. It's like a 5x7, small. And it began with just drawing some shapes. And there were pencil lines originally. I think I erased some of them because I don't see them here. But then I started going in with pencil. And so I got this gray area. You can see some texture there. And then I had some watercolors. And I thought, what if I just bring some black in? I like bright colors, but I felt like using black here. And you can see there's an area where there's some black paint that's been dabbed away. So I dried up a little bit of it because it was too black. And then I had my felt tip pens and I started adding other colors to this drawing. And then finally, I had my blue pen and I liked this kind of making these short little lines, kind of like cross hatching, but not. And I just added some of those. And I have a drawing that, you know, felt good to make. Is it a masterpiece? No, but it felt really good to do this. And that feeling, that freedom translates itself to the next thing I do, whether it's a drawing or a painting, or even if it's a conversation I'm having with someone or something I'm trying to write. That freedom translates to everything we do. That's the beauty of this. Sometimes we don't want to start with a blank page, especially with color. And we get very kind of tight and hesitant to just put color onto a white sheet of paper or a white canvas. In that case, start with an underpainting. And I do that a lot. I will start with, when I'm doing a watercolor, sometimes lately I've been doing this light blue, you can see here. And it's blue with a little bit of navy blue, a little bit of turquoise, a little bit of purple. And I just use a lot of water. And there I have a basis for whatever I'm going to do next. And it's somehow less intimidating. So you can consider that as an option. When I paint in my studio, sometimes I make a bright orange underpainting. It's a little risky to be doing that, but I like it, so I do it. And you'll see how that pans out in a little while. I'll show you an example, but this is a piece where I'm working big and I'm working very freely, very intuitively, but I have this big sheet of paper in front of me and I was like, ooh, I'm just, I was a little hesitant to just dive in. So you can see I did an underpainting of light blue. And then over that, I added a couple layers of a couple of forms that I created very loosely, very freely. I filled them in with more than one color. The large shape in the middle here has got blue. It's got some magenta red. The greens are a couple different shades of green, and I'm working wet on wet. So, which is something maybe we can talk about in another workshop, how you get various effects with watercolor. But I work abstractly to a great extent, not exclusively, but working abstractly does lend itself to working very freely. Um, and you can see I added pencil. The gray areas are pencil. Now, I had a great time doing this. Again, I think it was a useful exercise, but this is why process is important. I felt this was great, but I have a person who collects some of my work, and she just looked at it and she goes, I'm losing you with that orange, that kind of peachy orange. That's okay. This painting, it's not for her, it's for me. And if someone else likes it and wants it, then they can have it. But that orange is about me. So that's the way you think about these things. It's about you. You don't have to worry about what somebody else is thinking. Are you going to sell it? Is your friend going to like it? Is anyone going to like it? Is no one ever going to see it? That's okay too. Believe me, every artist has done a lot of work that they don't want anyone to see. That's okay. If you play an instrument, you spend hours practicing and you hope no one hears some of that practicing. So with us as visual artists, we do things that are not necessarily for public consumption. Most of this stuff that I'm talking about is not for public consumption. It's for you. This is the only kind of analytical thing I'm going to tell you about color. It has to do with relative color. When we put two colors next to each other, they react to one another. Our brains often will see contrasting colors as much brighter than colors that are closer together on the spectrum. So on the left-hand side, you've got this magenta square against a green background. And it just pops. It hurts my eyes to look at it. It's so bright. On the right-hand side, that magenta square, same color. I did this digitally, so it's exactly the same color. It appears a little more peaceful because it's against orange. So it's a little more chill, those two colors. And sometimes if you put colors together like this, people will say, well, you're using two different shades of magenta. No, it's just what they're up against. So that's just something to have in the back of your mind when you're working with color. If something looks brighter or deeper, more intense than it does the same paint using it against a different color, that's why. It's normal. It's how we perceive color relative to what's around it. Okay, this is an example, again, one of my own pieces, not abstract, obviously, but I mentioned that I often use an orange underpainting. So this is a piece I did recently. It's from my Fallout Flowers series. And you can see that very bright orange that's right along the ground area here. And that's part of an underpainting that I just never painted over because I liked it. But more than one person have asked me, they're going, oh, that orange, is it fluorescent? No, it's very cheap orange and red mixed together acrylic paint. Does not have a ton of pigment in it. There's nothing about it that's really bright, except the fact that I'm laying it down next to a brown, next to a green, and then up above it, you've got this fuzzy gray and white, so it pops. It looks really bright. That's that notion of relative color in action. So just have it in the back of your mind. Okay, composition is the last thing we're going to talk about. And I'm saying you already know this. We all have a sense of composition. But first of all, let's define what we're talking about. Composition is the arrangement of elements within a work of art, such as lines, shapes, colors, forms, that work together to create a visually cohesive, appealing final product. Painters guide their viewers' eyes by placing visual paths of interest in and through their work. And I'll show you an illustration of this in a moment. Um, but before I go any further, when we think about works of art that feel complete and balanced, we should be aware of the fact that if we go to the local kindergarten or nursery school and we look at the artwork that kids produce at that age, the composition tends to be perfect. Every drawing looks like it's complete. Everything looks balanced. We are born, most of us, with an innate sense of composition. What happens to it? Well, we go to school. We we're by the time we get to be 8, 9, 10, definitely by middle school, we've lost it. We've been criticized, we've been told what's right, what's wrong, we get self-conscious, and all of a sudden that intuitive sense has been sublimated. It's still there. That's why I'm saying you know about composition. You just haven't perhaps gotten to that part of yourself in a few decades. So we have to kind of relearn it in a way. And again, like color, God, I have books where they have chapters on composition and they tell you draw a line like this to create that, or to create balance, do this, this, and that. No, you don't have to do that. You can read it if you want, but it's going to get in the way of what you naturally know and have within yourself. So, here I've just got a statement from this online painting tutorial. I like looking at these things. Visual paths occur when certain areas throughout a painting connect by some manner of visual emphasis. I'm going to show you that quite literally in a moment. But how do we learn composition? I firmly believe if you're going to work intuitively, work spontaneously, the best way to improve your composition skills and get back to that fundamental ability you have is to look at a lot of great art. Surround yourself with it. So you can go to the library if you don't have a lot of art books, take out a book on Renaissance painting and look at the paintings, see which ones you like, see how they make you feel, see how the figures are organized. Go to the museum. Look at works that are pretty straightforward if this feels daunting to you, and try to understand, what does your eye gravitate towards? Where does your eye go? What's the focus of the painting? Let me show you. Okay, I love this drawing. I don't even remember where I got it. I got it when I first started teaching a long time ago. But this is a Chagall painting, Eye in the Village. It's a very famous painting. And someone has gone through and drawn the compositional lines, the way that you've got a circle in the middle of the painting that draws us right in. And then there's kind of an X diagonally that goes through. And then we have these lines that are shown by dotted lines. The line between the eye of the man and the eye of the horse or the donkey. And the two are like linked by a dotted line. We don't see the line, but our brains understand the line. That's why we see a dotted line on the right-hand side there. The same way we see dotted lines elsewhere, because our brains are kind of interpreting a circle, even though Chagall has not painted the circle. And you'll notice also how Chagall uses color very, very freely, very freely. So this is a case, you can find examples like this if you want online in books, but again, the best thing to do is look at great art. So I'm going to walk you through, I only have like, I think 2 more slides because I know we're reaching the end of our time. I'm going to walk you through these 2 very brilliant, compositionally completely different paintings. On the left, you have Masaccio's Holy Trinity. And the composition is symmetrical. There's some strong horizontals, the altar, the crucifix, and there's a strong vertical there, right up the middle of the painting. The crucifix. And up above Jesus's head, that's the head of God. That's the figure of God. You've got the columns, strong verticals. Down below, again, you steps, horizontals up at the top. Architecturally, you've got a horizontal. The whole thing feels very solid, stable, and balanced. No accident. There's not a lot of diagonals here because this is the Holy Trinity. This is fundamental to Christian dogma. This was painted for a Catholic church in 1425. Now we're going to move ahead to Rubens. We have an entirely different composition. Getting back to those lines I showed you early on, what does a diagonal say? It implies movement, it implies energy. And Rubens is giving us a diagonal composition. The biggest line here is diagonal, and it's Jesus on the cross being pushed up, being elevated for crucifixion. So, it's chaos, it's drama. And Rubens has counterbalanced this from, one could say, from left to right with right to left, other more subtle diagonals throughout the painting. So it feels balanced. But see, looking at work like this, it's pretty, I'm not going to say it's easy because people see different things in different works of art. But this is the kind of thing that if you look at enough and think about and just meditate on paintings, be they in books, online, in ideally a museum, you get a feel for composition. Your natural sense of composition will blossom if you let it this way. And then, what does all this have to do with intuition? We're learning about observation. When I talked about composition, line, shape, color, it's all about what we're seeing. And if our skills of observation are keen enough, we find inspiration everywhere. So I've just got 3 photos that I'm going to end with here. The one on the left is a beautiful design I saw on a eucalyptus tree, on the trunk of a eucalyptus tree. The center picture is just where a tree branch has been chopped. And I don't know, I guess it had moss growing on it, so it's kind of green and it pops out. It almost looks like a continent on a map or something. I just thought it was so dramatic. And the final one is someone spilled some either rhinestones or sequins on some gravel pavement, and it looked like the Milky Way. I just thought it was so pretty, so I photographed it. So I have these photos. If I want to, if I don't feel inspired, I can always look at these and go, I can work off of this. But you have to be able to observe before you can kind of get this inspiration. So that's what I have for you today. Questions, anything? Okay, then. Well, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I do these workshops live in person. And let me know if you'd like to meet up. Thanks very much.